Welcome back. All right, let's get right into it. Ever wonder what makes one AI a genius at conversation while another one is a master translator? Well, it all comes down to the blueprint, the fundamental architecture inside.
Okay, before we jump in, we've got to do the usual disclaimer. Just so you know, this is Module 2 of our 10-part tutorial on language models and, why they can be so fragile. Everything we're talking about is an overview based on a big report from Virtualization Options LLC, and it's really just for general guidance, so there's no warranty and this is definitely not legal or financial advice. As always, please talk to your own pros, your financial, technical, and legal folks before you take any action. And remember, these modules just scratch the surface of what's in the full research report. All right, with that out of the way, let's dive in.
So, here's the main idea for today. There's really a model for every task. You can't just pick one off the shelf and expect it to work for everything. Choosing the right architecture, that's your first, and honestly, your most critical step if you want to succeed.
So you're probably thinking, wait a minute, these things are so powerful, why can't one AI just do it all perfectly, right? Why do we need all these different types? Well, think about it like this. You wouldn't use a screwdriver to hammer a nail, would you? It's the same idea. Different AI tasks need different tools, and in this world, the tool is the model's architecture.
And listen, if you're in an IT role or making decisions about tech, this is absolutely crucial stuff. The architecture you pick, it literally shapes everything, the model's strengths, its weaknesses, and where it's actually going to shine or fail in the real world. Get this wrong at the start, and trust me, you're signing up for some major headaches later on. Okay, so that brings us to the main event. We're going to take a tour of the 3 core families of language models. You can think of these as the fundamental blueprints, the ancestors that almost every single model you hear about today is based on.
This table lays it all out really nicely. It's a great side-by-side of the big 3. And you can see right away how their core function, what they're fundamentally built to do, shapes what they're good at. You've got your decoder-only models, like the GPT series. Those are your creative writers and conversationalists. Then you have encoder-decoders, which are like expert translators. And finally, the encoder-only models, like BERT, which are all about deep understanding, perfect for things like search.
All right, let's zoom in on decoder-only models first. These are the storytellers of the AI world. They literally work from left to right, building a response one little piece at a time. They predict the very next token, which you can think of as a word or even part of a word, based on everything they've said so far. It's this continuous, flowing process that makes them feel so natural for things like creative writing, generating code, or just having an open-ended conversation.
Next up, we've got the encoder-decoder models. The best way to think of these guys is as transformation specialists. It's a 2-part system. First, the encoder reads and really digests the entire input, let's say a sentence in German. Then, the decoder takes that complete understanding and generates a totally new output, like that same sentence, but now in Japanese. This 2-step dance is exactly why they're rock stars at translation and summarization.
And that brings us to our 3rd family, encoder-only models. These are the deep thinkers, the scholars. Their whole purpose is comprehension, not generation. And here's their superpower. They read text in both directions, forwards and backwards at the same time. This gives them an incredibly rich understanding of context for every single word. That's why they don't write you a story, but they are absolute beasts when it comes to classifying text, understanding sentiment, or powering a really smart search engine.
Okay, so we have our 3 core families, but the story doesn't just stop there. It gets more interesting. Beyond that basic blueprint, there are 2 other massive factors that totally change the game: specialization and just sheer scale.
Think about it. You can take one of these base models and put it on a highly specialized diet of data. You feed it nothing but biomedical research, and poof, you get a medical expert like BioBert. Feed it legal contracts all day, and you get a legal eagle. Or give it millions and millions of lines of code, and you get something like GitHub Copilot. The cool part is, these specialists can often run circles around a general model when it comes to their specific domain.
And then there's the other factor, scale. We're talking about models with over 1 trillion parameters. Now, what's a parameter? The easiest way to think of it is like a little knob or dial that the model learns to tune perfectly during its training. So imagine having 1 trillion of those dials. That gives it a mind-boggling capacity to learn complex patterns and remember what you were talking about an hour ago in a long conversation. But this brings up a really important question. Is bigger always better? And the answer is a definite no.
A smaller, highly specialized model can often totally outperform a giant general-purpose one on its home turf. For a lot of real-world business needs, going with a more efficient, targeted model that's been trained on super high-quality, relevant data isn't just a good choice, it's often the smarter choice.
So, let's recap. We've got these incredible blueprints, these specialized experts, and models at a scale we could barely imagine a few years ago. But there's a catch. There's a true limit, a fundamental vulnerability that even the most perfect architecture in the world can't fix on its own.
And it all boils down to this one single powerful idea. I'm going to read this quote directly from the source report because it's just that important. Here it is. The architecture determines the model's potential, but the data determines whether it reaches that potential. Let that sink in for a second. The crucial takeaway here is this. You can have the fanciest, most sophisticated, most expensive architecture on the planet. But if you feed it garbage data, guess what you're going to get? A garbage model. It's the classic garbage in, garbage out. The architecture might build the stage, but the data is the actual performance.
And that leaves us with a pretty provocative question to end on. If even the world's best architecture is so fragile, if it's completely at the mercy of the data it's trained on, then what exactly is hiding in that data? That's a question we're going to start to unravel next time.